Okay, we are live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Travels with the Creative Contessa. And today I'm going to bring you the travel buzz. So there's been some interesting changes in the travel world that will affect everyone who travels, no matter what kind of travel it is you prefer to do. And we're going to be discussing those this evening / morning / afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. And I will also be sharing with you some of my biggest travel fails and the lessons you can learn from those failures, nearly tragic failures, in fact, that will make your travels go more smoothly going forward. So first off, good morning. I am currently, or actually good evening, I am currently visiting South Korea. I'm in the city of Daegu, and for those of you who don't know where that is, it is in the southern part of the country. Yes, there is absolutely life beyond Seoul, contrary to what all of the programming will tell you. If you watch K-drama, you might think that Korea and Seoul were synonymous and one and the same, but they are not. There is a life beyond that. And I am in one of the major cities that is, in fact, beyond that. So yeah, the format tonight is going to be, I will be sharing news with you. And if you have any questions, go ahead and pop them in the live chat and I will answer them. If you behave like a miscreant, I will ban you. Okay, so let's get to the news. So first off, for those of you who are interested in cruising, I'm also going to do some crafting while we chat. I hope you don't mind. Many of you should know by now I don't do just one thing at a time ever. So for those of you who are interested in cruising, and if you are considering cruising to Hawaii, for instance, you should be aware that Hawaii is implementing a cruise tax. It will be, and actually they already have one, but they're going to be increasing it. It's not technically a cruise tax, it's technically a transient accommodations tax, TAT. However, really affects mostly just cruise lines. And there are many places that are starting to implement this because they are recognizing the fact that cruise lines and cruises don't actually necessarily bring that much in terms of income for the local location. So for instance, in Venice, the cruise ships would come and passengers would disembark. Well, they wouldn't really disembark. They would leave the cruise ship for the day. They would not spend very much money in Venice. They would cause a lot of damage. They would litter. They would take up lots of room, but they wouldn't actually eat at the local restaurants. They didn't buy very much. And the environmental impact of having the cruise ships there in Venice was pretty immense. Well, so they banned cruise ships, but then they realized that there's still over tourism of a massive amount to a large degree there in Venice. And so what they did is they have now implemented an entry tax for day trippers. So if you plan to day trip to Venice, you are now going to have to pay this entry fee. Now, some of you, if you've been there, this isn't new. This has been a couple of years at this point. But many places are starting to do this. And it's because since COVID basically ended, there has been a massive uptick in travel and tourism all across the world in favorite tourist destinations, and it's actually overwhelming them. When I was in Istanbul in October, the number of humans there was alarming to me. I'm claustrophobic by nature, and the last time I was in Istanbul, there weren't that many people, but everywhere we went, it was shoulder to shoulder humanity. So various places, various locations around the world, tourist destinations are seeking ways to limit tourism to a more reasonable dull roar instead of massive overpopulation. Part of what some of the measures that are being taken are timed entry for sites. So for instance, Pompeii now has not only a visitor cap, but timed entry. So if you were cruising into Naples and you wanted to go to Pompeii, you might need to book your tickets in advance. Otherwise, you might arrive at the archaeological cities there and be told there are no tickets available. I personally am massively in favor of limiting the number of people who visit any given site on any given day. These are historic buildings. They weren't designed to tolerate millions upon millions of people a year visiting them. That wasn't their original design. That wasn't the engineering that went into building them. Those considerations weren't part of it. So I personally have absolutely no problem with limiting the number of people who visit these sites. Now, one thing that is happening is that the cost of visiting UNESCO World Heritage sites, for instance, is skyrocketing in certain places. So in Turkey, it now costs an absurd amount of money to visit Topkapi Palace. It was 55 euros when we were there in October. Ephesus was also right around 55 euros. You know, the little tiny castle that is there in Kujadazi next to the cruise port, which doesn't have very much worth seeing, even that was 10 euros for not very much worth seeing. So, you know, some places are taking extreme measures to prevent over-tourism, but it doesn't seem to have worked because Topkapi Palace was still chock-a-block humanity, unfortunately. Good evening. Welcome everyone to the Travel Buzz. I am the Creative Contessa. I am going to be doing some crafting while we have a nice little news chat and I share the latest news with you. If you have any questions about travel, I've been traveling since I was 5 years old, so a very long time. I traveled by plane, by boat, by bus, by horse. So I have quite a lot of experience and I'm happy to share it with you. So yeah, Hawaii is now increasing the transient accommodation tax, and the cruise lines will absolutely be passing that on to you as a passenger. So just keep that in mind. Such transient accommodation taxes are actually leading some cruise lines to cancel port stops, depending on how high they are, because they don't think that their passengers will tolerate that increase in their cruise fare to cover the cost, and they of course don't want to absorb the cost themselves. So if you're on a cruise ship and your itinerary suddenly changes, it could be because of that. It could be because the cruise line just doesn't want to absorb that cost and doesn't think you'll be very happy to absorb it yourself. All right, so other changes that are coming down the pipeline. Do any of you fly American Airlines? As you know, over the years, there has been a race to the bottom across the airline industry to offer passengers less while charging them more. One of those delightful innovations was so-called basic economy, right? Basic economy was bullshit. And of course, once one airline introduced it, they all introduced it. American Airlines is taking it to the next step. So basically, most airlines had gotten rid of mileage-based miles earnings for their loyalty programs and for frequent flyer earnings. They went to a spend model where you collect miles based on how much your ticket cost. Well, American Airlines has quietly changed the policy for basic economy. Now, if you have a basic economy ticket, no matter how much it costs you on American Airlines, you will earn no miles whatsoever, not a single one. Now, some people say, I don't care, I never use miles or points to book tickets. Who cares about loyalty these days? And I'm sorry, spend is spend. If you are, as an airline, are going to predicate people's loyalty and earning status on how much they spend, it shouldn't matter if you spend that amount of money on a basic economy ticket or a main cabin ticket or a premium economy ticket, right? Spend should be spent. Apparently, American Airlines does not agree, and where American Airlines goes, it's highly likely the other American flag carriers will follow fairly shortly. So just keep that in mind. If you care about earning miles and points when you fly American Airlines, you will now have to have a main cabin or higher ticket fare. No longer will basic economy earn you anything. Yeah. What do you all think? Do any of you actually use points or collect points, or any of you trying to collect status? I personally stopped trying to collect or attain elite status on any airline a couple of years ago when they all severely devalued the both their earning charts, for example, Delta Airlines and its Sky Pesos, and also increase the amount you would have to earn just to obtain status. So I don't personally care. All I care about is the cost of my fare, the kind of seat it is, and if it's going when and where I need to go. I don't care which airline it is. I mean, okay, sometimes I care because I know that one airline is superior to the other, but in the US, there's not much in the way of competition for quality of experience in terms of what you get in any class of service, sadly. So most people have given up status chasing, and that seems to be what the airlines want. So there it is. So let's see, other news. Other ways, other big changes that have been happening across the travel world. Countries like Japan have started policing the behavior of tourists much more rigorously. So if you are visiting Japan, for instance, and you decide to over-imbibe in sake and go on a screaming rampage down the street, disorderly conduct, as it were, you will be fined. And the things that you can be fined for in Japan are not the same as the things for which you can be fined in other countries. For instance, did you know in Japan that it is illegal to walk and smoke at the same time? So tourists have been actually getting fined for doing that, for walking and smoking. Personally, I think that's great. I hate smoke. I hate cigarette smoke. I hate marijuana smoke. I don't want to breathe it. It makes me ill. It gives me a headache. It makes it so I don't want to be in a place. I appreciate those smokers who sit somewhere secretly, engage in their personal predilections in a way that it doesn't impact me. I'm very frustrated by inconsiderate smokers who decide to share their disgusting habit with everyone, regardless of whether their audience wishes to partake or not. So I'm actually kind of happy that Japan has a rule against walking and smoking at the same time. I find that pretty amusing, actually. So yeah, there's an increasing group of countries who are experiencing this over-tourism that I mentioned earlier, and they are increasingly implementing and enforcing rules that should make the experience life better for residents. Because a lot of these tourist destinations have, now that they're suffering from over-tourism, residents can't live there anymore. Airbnb has destroyed local residential economies, by which I mean, now in Florence, for instance, in the old city, Florentines can't afford to live there. The rents are too high. The real estate is too high because once Airbnb came along, people started snapping up apartments and buying them and treating them as rental properties without going through any of the licensing that you should have to have or the zoning you should have to have for a hotel. So what that means that the value of those properties went up, and a landlord could make, I don't know, 2,000 euros a month from renting an apartment. Probably not that much. Could, before COVID, make 1,000 euros a month by renting a small apartment to someone to live there, normally, or they could make thousands upon thousands of euros a month in Airbnb rental fees. So you can see which one a landlord would prefer to do. But what that changes is it drastically alters the character of the city itself, and it made Florence into something it wasn't ever meant to be. A city that feels completely artificial because people don't really live in the old city anymore. So Florence has actually implemented, I believe they've taken effect, regulations, laws that will limit the amount of time that can be spent as in a property as a short-term rental. I don't remember what it is exactly, but what it means is that you can no longer own 10 apartments. You have to live in them. They're actually expecting that you, the owner, will live in them for like 6 months of the year. So that means if you have 10 properties there in Florence, you can't use them as short-term rentals. You could use them for long-term rentals, and that's no problem. No problem with that. But you can't use them for short-term rentals anymore, meaning no more Airbnb. But honestly, Airbnb has been completely corrupted from its original form, its original intention, right? The original sharing economy, Uber as well. The idea was for Uber, you're driving somewhere, you can pick someone up on the way there and take them with you or drop them off along your way, right? Not that you would become a full-time Uber driver. The original idea with Airbnb is people have extra bedrooms in their homes and they could just rent them out, right, to casual guests. And that quickly morphed into people buying multiple apartments in a building and turning them into vacation rentals and getting around a number of local hospitality regulations by listing them on Airbnb. So what were before residences suddenly turned into vacation rentals only. So a lot of communities are pushing back against that, Venice as well. I actually am perfectly fine with that. Yes, I have, of course, taken advantage of vacation rentals in many of the places that are now passing these regulations. It will make my life a little more challenging to have a more limited inventory, but I would rather that and the city gets to go back to being a place where actual Florentines live, for instance, than have the convenience of being able to rent a 17th century palazzo whenever I want. Do any of you have any thoughts on Airbnb and how it has affected local economies, how it has changed the nature of tourism? Hotels are having real issues competing with Airbnb, and I don't care about Hyatt having issues competing. I mean, those big conglomerates can go to hell as far as I'm concerned. But there's, for example, in many European cities, there's a lot of privately owned properties, hotels and lodgings and bed and breakfasts that are suffering because of the Airbnb economy. Yeah. So other changes that are coming to these highly touristed destinations, of course, big concern is environmental sustainability. And so communities, countries are considering how to prevent their environmental resources, their environmental treasures from being, destroyed by over-tourism, by litter, by the actual physical traffic of people going through them. And so that's going to, part of that is going to be caps on the number of tourists who actually be allowed into certain places. So you may have to plan more carefully going forward. The list was Greece. Hold on, I've got the list here. Let me find the list. The list of countries, I wrote it down because it was quite a few. The list of countries who are going to start implementing these restrictions: Japan, Italy, Greece, Spain, Iceland, and France plan on issuing visitor caps. France is apparently the most highly touristed country in the world, which I just learned today. I mean, I knew it was popular. I didn't realize it was the most highly touristed country in the world. So those countries plan on implementing visitor caps. They're enforcing fines on misbehavior and people who make loud noise. So, just because you had too much sake does not excuse you. Smoking while walking, at least in Japan, entry fees into parts of cities. I'm not talking about museums. I mean, like, just to go into Venice, to leave the train station and go into the city, for instance, you don't have to pay an entry fee. And of course, caps on that. So yeah, there are going to be some big changes coming to travel in the popular destinations, which means you as a traveler might want to consider going to the less popular places, right? That's my goal for the next year. I have some potential destinations lined up. Uganda is among them, Tajikistan, Mongolia. So I'm really excited about getting to see a completely different part of the world. Europe is usually my go-to because it's my happy place. But, I'm okay with, and I'm not just okay with, I'm excited to travel to completely new and for me, exotic destinations, a completely different kind of life, a completely different culture, a completely different history. Okay, so that's it pretty much for the travel news for this week. I mean, I don't know, some of you may have heard that in the Northeast, it's a disaster right now, the United States. A big winter storm came in and just dumped a lot of snow and ice on New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey, and it's a state of emergency there. And something like 900 flights or thousands of flights have been canceled. It's pretty nightmarish. Unfortunately, the United States has a lot of inclement weather pretty much all year round that interferes with flying on a frequent. I mean, every time I go back, any flight, I usually have a couple of flights every time I go to the US. I have a couple of domestic flights. At least one of them has a delay of some kind, and it's nearly always related to inclement weather. It's just the nature of the United States. I'm wondering why they can't design machinery that can triumph over the inclement weather, but it could also be that climate change is creating inclement weather that cannot be superseded, in essence. So what that means is that right now there's a lot of people stranded in the US, and that, of course, cancellations absolutely have a knock-on effect, because probably, I'm going to assume, it being the holidays, those flights were full. They probably didn't have any empty seats on later flights, which means there's going to be this horrible knock-on effect of either trying to schedule extra flights to compensate for the cancellations, or bumping people onto later and later flights until they get everyone to where they need to go based on the tickets they bought. So yeah, big mess in the US. It's, and the annoying thing about the US is that with all this inclement weather, they could really use some trains. Like, trains would get around the issues of storms that shut airports down, because trains can continue going even when it snows. Even if there's a storm, unless there's flooding, trains can keep going. But of course, there just aren't that many trains in the United States. The train network covers very little of it, which means that to go long distances, you either drive, in which case see inclement weather, or you fly, in which case see inclement weather. It's a problem. The US really desperately needs trains, but the oil lobby will probably prevent that from ever happening in any kind of real way. I actually learned why. I was wondering why. I've been wondering for a while why there is no direct train from Penn Station or Grand Central Station in New York, from Penn Station, actually, because I don't think Grand Central has any more trains. Anyway, from Penn Station to JFK. Why is there no direct train that goes from Penn Station all the way to JFK? And I fell into the rabbit hole of the Byzantine complexity of the New York City and New Jersey port authorities and the various transit authorities, and how various different agencies control different parts of the network, and how the original subway lines were intentionally designed to basically be not very useful because they were supposed to actually keep poor people out of, certain neighborhoods. So yeah, I don't know if there will ever be a train that goes from Penn Station to JFK, but it's a noticeable lack, because almost all cities in the world with cities with major international airports anyway, have a train line that goes from the center of the city to the airport without having to change trains. The problem with the way you can take the train now from JFK to, say, Manhattan, is that you have to change to the air train, which means you have to get off the train, haul your bags across uneven sidewalk, and actually a good 500 feet or more upstairs, and elevators that don't always work, and get on a different train. It's not like there's a nice platform that you could easily change to the air train. Doesn't work that way. So it's not very convenient. And the reason is that since the 19th century, the network was just not built to accommodate that. And now you've got all these different agencies who claim authority over different parts of the city. And so how would that even work? It's too expensive to build anything in the city, apparently, according to some experts I was reading, which is really tragic because JFK is not easy to get to. It's on the, it's on the outside of the city. It's on the east side of the city, basically, which makes Newark a much more desirable so-called New York City airport, honestly. Oh, goodness. Yeah. Okay. So speaking of trains, I was going to share with you this evening some of my travel misadventures because I've had many travel misadventures over the years. Among them, all of them using all of the methods of transport that I have mentioned, trains, buses, planes, you name it. So, of course, cruising is something I really enjoy doing. And when I lived in Europe, when I lived in Germany, um, we could fly to a cruise port. Usually cruises departed from Civitavecchia because we were doing Mediterranean cruises. Flying, of course, means we'd have to pay for extra luggage because we would have plenty of clothes for our cruise. Of course, I'm a bit of a clothes horse. I like to dress elegantly when I travel. So that meant that the train became a very desirable option. And lo, there was a night train that was on offer for a very reasonable price, and 120 euros per person. And that was from Frankfurt, where I lived, with a connection in Munich. And then from Munich, it was the night train all the way to Rome. No problem. Well, we were in Frankfurt waiting for our train. And the train suddenly was delayed 5 minutes, and then it was delayed 10 minutes, and then 15 and 20, until finally it was delayed an hour and 20 minutes. Well, that should have been fine. 5 or 10 minutes, even half an hour would have been fine. We had an hour layover in Munich to catch our connection. Should have been no problem. It was a problem, though, because in Germany, once a train is late, it no longer has priority on the tracks. Once it is off schedule, it doesn't get more on schedule, it gets less on schedule because it has to pull over to a side track. It literally gets sidetracked every time another train comes along. So what that means is that our train started off 55 minutes late, and we thought, okay, maybe the driver can make up time. That'll still give us 5 minutes to change in Munich. We can do it. They'll hold the train for us. Because we ended up having to pull over something like 30 times between Frankfurt and Munich. We were sidetracked 30 times. So we didn't get to Munich until an hour and a half after we were supposed to have gotten there. And then we were told, the conductor told us, don't worry, they've got a train to Venice. A night train to Venice, they'll take care of you. Yes, you have beds. We know you have beds. You'll have a bed on the night train to Venice too. So we get to Munich, all of us, there was probably 30 people trying to make that night train connection, rush to the train for Venice, and the conductor tells us, oh, no, there are no beds available. They're all taken by passengers who are supposed to be on this train. So instead of having a nice bed, which we paid extra for, by the way, and arriving in Rome refreshed and well-rested, we get on this train and we are crammed into a normal compartment with seats that don't recline. And this is going to be about, let me see, it was an 8-hour ride overnight, by the way. So no sleep. There was no sleep for us. And then sometime in the middle of the night, someone goes screaming down the corridor saying that their luggage has been robbed, their iPads were stolen. So we have thieves on the train. Awesome, right? We have valuable things in our luggage, and our luggage couldn't be in the compartment with us because the compartments were too small for the 6 people plus all of the 6 people's bags. So we ended up not sleeping. We ended up going and basically draping our bodies across our luggage to protect it, to keep it safe. And then we arrived in Venice at 8 a.m. looking really ragged. So we get into Venice Mestre, and one of the families that had been with us on the train from Frankfurt, they descend from the train looking really refreshed. And they tell us that the conductor gave them a bed, gave them a private cabin with 3 beds. They were served breakfast. They had the most wonderful experience ever. I was furious. I saw red. If I had seen that Deutsche Bahn conductor who had lied to me and told me there were no beds available, I would have ripped him limb from limb. I was so angry. So the other lie that the Deutsche Bahn had told us was that the conductor in Venice on the train that we were told to get on, the one that was connecting then to Rome, because the night train was only going as far as Venice, not all the way to Rome, that the Trenitalia Italia would be expecting us and they would have seats for us. Well, we get on the train with all of our bags, and the conductor comes up to us and said, "What are you doing? You can't get on this train. You don't have tickets for this train." I almost lost my mind. I planted myself. I said, absolutely not. We are on this train. The Deutsche Bahn said you would take care of us. I'm on this train. You are not moving me. And the most amazing thing happened. She whipped out a smartphone. She poked around a little bit and she found 2 seats that were free all the way to Rome for Ryan and me. The Deutsche Bahn conductors didn't have smartphones, couldn't figure out where seats were available or beds were available, just lied to us and told us that nothing was available. We'd have to get crammed into the not sleeper compartments, the 6-person sitting compartments. So we arrived in Rome 4 hours later than we were supposed to, and feeling like the damned. It was a pretty rough experience. Takeda, happy holidays. Nice to see you. So you can see I'm crafting and chatting travel. If you have any questions or comments about travel, just let me know. I'm just relating my own travel horror stories so that people can prepare. So this is what I've learned from this, about the difference between the Deutsche Bahn and Trenitalia. Trenitalia is much better organized, surprisingly. I know that's not Italy's general reputation as being a place of organization and timeliness, but there it is, it's true. The conductors on Trenitalia are much friendlier, are much more helpful than the ones that I've experienced on the Deutsche Bahn. And the trains in Italy are much better about being on time than the trains in Germany. The train network in Germany is overcapacitated. There aren't enough rails for the amounts of trains, passenger trains and cargo trains that are using them. And so that means that even the slightest delay to a train sets it off for an increasing, a delay that will grow as the day goes on. So yeah, if you are in Germany and you're booking trains, book a long layover if you have a connection, unless you want to play the connection game. You know, make sure you have, I would say, an hour. Honestly, at least an hour if you have any kind of connection. And if it costs more, but there's a direct line where you don't have to change trains, it's worth the extra money, because Germany's got big issues with the Deutsche Bahn now. It's ever since they privatized, it's just gotten really bad. The Deutsche Bahn has gotten really expensive. It's gotten inefficient. The quality has dropped. You know, the trains that they're using now, the ICE trains that they're using now, were the same trains they were using 25 years ago. And you can tell. So if you're traveling in Germany, I mean, I do recommend taking the train. I personally prefer the train. It means you're not subject to the dreaded German Stau, which you would be if you took the bus. It is not cheap. However, the Deutsche Bahn is absolutely not an inexpensive form of travel if you are using it casually without the Bahncard or something like that. But you should keep in mind that you might not get to your destination when you think you will. It's highly likely you won't, in fact. So for instance, back in November, I was flying from Germany to the US, and I was visiting a friend out in Franken, in Franconia. So they took me to Würzburg train station so I could catch the ICE to Frankfurt International Airport. Well, I specifically picked a train that was going to get me there 4 hours early so that if there were delays of the amount and quantity to which I had become accustomed in Germany, that it would not be a problem, that I would still make my flight in a timely fashion. As it turns out, the train was not late. I arrived at the airport with plenty of time to spare, in fact, too much, because the Turkish Airlines counter was not accepting early check-ins. So I had to wait an hour for a check-in counter to open, but I would rather have to wait an hour and just kind of spend that time walking around the airport, getting in some extra exercise, rather than panicking and sprinting to hope I get to the check-in counter before it closes. So yeah, and you know, anytime I'm far away from an airport, as in not within walking distance of the airport or easy Uber distance of an airport, I always plan to get there well in advance so that I'm not stressed. I made the counter mistake in 2017 in Korea, actually. I caught the airport limousine buses, they're called, which is, you know, like the really nice cushy buses. By the way, Korean limousine buses, super posh, super comfy. I unfortunately planned to get there 2 hours early by bus. Well, we hit traffic. We hit serious traffic. in Incheon, basically on the way to the airport, crossing the bridge. It was stop and go. I arrived at the airport 35 minutes before my international flight was to depart. Thankfully, it was Asiana Airlines and they're hubbed out of Incheon, so they have counters open all the time. I rushed up to the counter and they worked with me. They really did. They checked me in and they pushed me through security through the special people line, because I guess being 35 minutes before takeoff definitely makes me special. And I actually caught my flight. But I know there are plenty of airlines, airline crew who would not have done that, who would have not bent the rules and or bent over backwards to try to make sure I made that flight. So yeah, that was that was the trip that made me realize, yeah, I definitely need to make sure I'm always arriving at the airport well in advance if it's not within an easy Uberable distance. So Takeda, are you visiting family or traveling anywhere over the holidays? Let's see, other disasters, other things I have learned. European travel. If you are, oh God, the difference between buses in Korea and buses in Europe, so massive. So buses in Korea, the limousine buses specifically, I'm not talking about regular like city public transit buses, express buses, the nice intercity buses. In Korea, they are so nice. They've got big, comfy chairs. They recline really far. They have leg rests that come up really high. You've got lots of leg room. It's a 2-1 configuration, so you're not crammed in very tightly. Plenty of room for your luggage. The bus drivers generally aren't grumpy. They stop every hour and a half for a rest. No onboard bathrooms, so no unfortunate smells. Right? Love Korean limousine buses. By contrast, we were in the UK in the end of October, and we took a limousine bus, or a so-called coach bus from Southampton to Heathrow, and it was like being squeezed into a sardine can. It was so uncomfortable. I mean, the seats were packed in tightly, one behind the other. They were narrow. Goodness, I can't imagine if I was uncomfortably tight in those narrow seats. I can't imagine how a normal person, someone who actually has some girth to them, would have felt. And they weren't cheap either. It was an expensive bus. So it really made me super appreciate the comfy limousine buses in Korea. But so after that disaster of a train experience with the Deutsche Bahn getting down to Rome, in 2016, we were traveling once again from Germany to Rome to embark on a cruise. And so we thought, well, this time we will take the overnight bus, right? We'll just sleep on the bus. It will be great. So we took Flixbus. Well, it's a nice theory, but here's what happens on buses that go long distances. And this is regulations. It's not like Flixbus necessarily wanted it this way, but the regulations are that for safety reasons, every hour and a half or 2 hours, I think it might be 2 hours, hopefully it was 2 hours, the bus has to stop, the driver has to get out and walk around, there has to be a 20-minute break so that, the driver stays fresh, and also so that no one has any accidents, shall we say. Well, that's all fine and well during the day, but the way in which they executed these regular stops in the middle of the night was to pull over, turn the lights on, and make a very loud announcement. So every 2 hours, we were awoken from a dead sleep to this very loud announcement of having reached this rest stop, and it was, of course, in the harshest German you can imagine. It was not gently said. So once again, we arrived in Rome, exhausted, feeling jet lagged because we didn't sleep, even though there was no time zone change. We got very little in the way of sleep. So we arrived in Rome for the first day of our vacation, absolutely knackered, which meant the first day in Rome was a waste. We did nothing. We dragged our bags to our bed and breakfast, and we collapsed, and we slept for like 12 hours or 13 hours or something like that. Sad, because we'd planned to actually do some sightseeing, get some nice walk along the Tiber, that kind of thing. Nope, no such luck. So if you decide to take Flixbus, any bus in Europe a long distance, be aware that they will probably, and you want to do it overnight, they will stop every hour and a half to 2 hours. They will turn the lights on and they will announce it. So don't count on that being a restful experience. Okay, Takeda says, I wound up being very, very home. Sinus infection. Oh my God. Jesus, I'm sorry, Takeda. I used to get sinus infections all the time because I had a congenitally severely deviated septum. Thankfully, a German ear, nose, and throat doctor spied it on a regular checkup and we fixed it. But yeah, I used to get sinus infections all the time. Whew, I do not miss those days at all. Not at all. And let me tell you, flying in an airplane with a sinus infection is a special kind of torture, right? I think that might be one of those like hell punishments for people who sinned in life, but also like to travel, that in their hell loop, they have to take flights, long distance flights with sinus infections. So if you plan, in short, if you want to travel around Europe, you can take the train, you can take the bus. Unfortunately, the trains are not very well interconnected, and there aren't a lot of good direct routes to get to most places you might want to go. So you're going to have to change trains multiple times. For instance, if you want to get from Rome to London, you're going to change trains multiple times. And that's going to mean possibly hauling your bags up and down stairs because not all European stations are accessible. We get spoiled here in Korea. In Korea, everything is accessible. Every train station, the museums, the historic sites, they're all accessible. They all have ramps, they all have elevators, they all have escalators. Not true in Europe, not at all. In Europe, there are, the tube, my God, the tube, another travel nightmare. So another time embarking on a cruise, we were staying with friends in London near Hyde Park, and we could not find a driver to drive us down to Southampton. I'm too used to Korea where taxi drivers will happily drive you 200 kilometers. So we ended up having to haul our bags. Well, we dragged our bags, we had four full-size bags, 2 carry-ons, and I think a loot. That's usually how much we have on any given long cruise. And we went to King's Cross, or we were going to King's Cross to catch the train down to Southampton. And so we went to the local metro stop, and the local metro stop did not have elevators, did not have escalators. It had lots of winding stairs. And I had never noticed that before about the tube because I'd never tried to drag bags up and down the tube. And I like stairs normally. So, there only being stairs didn't bother me before. But now that I've got 400 pounds of luggage, it bothered me. So keep that in mind, that if you want to take public transit and use things like the tube in London, it's not a very accessible system. It's an antique system, honestly. It is a living museum, basically, to public transit. So they have not updated all of the tube stops, or even many of the tube stops, to have the kinds of accommodations that we might generally expect from such an experience. And that's something generally to keep in mind. If you have accessibility issues, if you have mobility restrictions, I really do recommend that you research in advance the places you're going to visit and make sure that there are some kinds of the appropriate level of accommodation, whatever that is for you. Just double check. Note that for airports will offer mobility services. You just have to call and arrange them in advance. It's not hard. You just call, you give them your flight information, and then they'll make sure that there is one of those cute little electric wagons to take you from point A to point B, or someone to push you in a wheelchair, that sort of thing. But that is not available for, say, the tube. It's not available for the subway in New York either. So be aware. This is why my recommendation is always make certain that you pack bags that you can carry up and down stairs, because you might end up somewhere where there isn't someone to help you, and there's no elevators, no escalators, no form of lifting aid. Now, granted, in the case of the tube, we were able to carry our bags up and down the stairs. It just wasn't fun, and especially not fun because of the way the stairwells work in a lot of the old tube stops in London. They're very labyrinthine. It's not just, straight down a set of stairs or straight up a set of stairs. There's a set of stairs here, a little corridor there, then another set of stairs, then another corridor, then another set of stairs. And I get this all sounds privileged because I at least have I've had the privilege, the joy of traveling to the UK a lot, and therefore getting to use the tube a lot. But I'm just putting the information out there so that you can make your own best choices, your own best plans when you decide you want to travel to these places. The other thing you might need to be aware of, for those of you who aren't familiar with public transit so much, or specifically with unionized countries, there might be public transit strikes. I have encountered public transit strikes on so many occasions when I travel. I do travel a lot, so that makes it more likely, but it still seems statistically significant. Almost every time I go to the United Kingdom, some train service or some train line or some public transit service is on strike. One time we landed in Gatwick to embark on the Queen Mary 2 on a transatlantic journey in 2016, actually. And there was a train strike. And we had planned to take the train from Gatwick to Southampton, but because there was a strike, there was limited service and we actually had to wait 2 hours. So we didn't get into Southampton until 1 a.m. We were supposed to have gotten in there hours before that. And we've often been in London when there was a tube strike or a bus driver strike. On embarking for a cruise in Rome, my first ever actually. We landed at Fiumicino, Rome's main airport, and just as we came out of baggage control, a taxi strike had just started. The taxi drivers were striking, and we had planned to take a taxi the 4 kilometers to our airport hotel because we were embarking the next day and there's no point in going into the city. We landed at like 11:30 p.m., right? We had a late evening flight. It was the cheap flight with obvious reasons in retrospect. So the taxi drivers, because they were technically on strike, and this was the really weird part, the taxi drivers were technically on strike. So instead of offering the regular fares, they were actually selling themselves to the highest bidder. There were bidder wars for people to get a taxi to take them to the hotels. So they were going, we're talking 4 kilometers, they were selling their services for 200 euros for 4 or 5 kilometer ride. I looked at my then husband, Greg, and I said, absolutely not, we will walk. So we borrowed a baggage cart, both of us each. We loaded our luggage up into it and we set out to find our way in the dark to our little hotel so that we, could just get there and sleep. We were just so exhausted. So we ended up getting to our hotel at about 1:30. Thankfully, it had a 24-hour reception, so we were able to still check in. And you will be pleased to know that there were 3 other baggage carts right next to where we left ours by the lamp post across the street. So we weren't the only ones who ended up having to take that option. Oh yeah, and the strike also included buses. So there were no buses either, right? It was a public transit strike and somehow the taxis were included in that. So you also might want to, these kinds of things, strikes tend to be announced in advance. And I'll be honest, I never think to look to check if there's going to be some kind of public transit strike happening, but I'm recommending that to you. If you decide you're going to travel to anywhere, check to see if and public transit is part of your plan, i.e. you're not going to rent a car, then check and see if there's a strike happening that could impact you and come up with an alternate method of getting around. Right. I will have to take that own lesson under advisement, I suppose, actually. Oh, wow, I just realized this is not streaming to Facebook at all. So if any of you had any travel hiccups, frustrations of the kind that I've been talking about, let's see, what other garbage have I experienced? What other learning experiences have I enjoyed in my travel life? Oh, lost luggage. Okay, so I just rolled out a short on this, and some of you were asking me about it. So back in 2016, we were going on a cruise. This was the same trip where we had the bus that kept waking us up every 2 hours. And we were flying Condor business class. We were the first to check in, so we got there nice and early. We got there literally as the counters opened. So we were there in plenty of time at SeaTac, plenty of time for them to get our fucking bags on the bus, excuse my language, on the bus, on the plane, right? So we go to the lounge, we embark on the plane, we fly over there, it's all good. We land at Frankfurt, go to the baggage carousel, because we're going to be visiting some friends. We're going 6 days before our cruise so that we can visit with some friends, our friends who live there in Germany. So we're at the baggage carousel, and we have priority luggage. So our bags should have come out first. Should have, right? Well, they don't. Everyone else's bags come out, and there's about 10 of us, 15 of us whose bags don't arrive. Just about the right amount for one of those baggage carts. No, it was 10 of us. Yeah, 10 of us. Just about enough bags for one of those baggage carts onto which they upload the bags to take them out to the plane, right? One of those didn't make it on. It was very clear. Now, we go to the Condor baggage counter, and they tell us, oh, I'm sorry, your bags are lost. We don't know where they are. But here, fill this out and fill that out, and we'll go and find them and we'll get them to you. Please send us the address to which we can send them. We say, well, we're here in Germany for the next 4 days, but then we're going down to Rome. So you need to get us those bags before then. And also, we need clothes. Oh, well, any clothes you buy, just save the receipts and we'll reimburse you. Okay, well, we get the runaround for the next 2 days. Condor doesn't know where the bags are. They don't know where the bags are. They don't know where the bags are. And I have a brother who's at the time worked for a pretty powerful law firm. And he heard about our plight. And because, in those bags are clothes that are not so replaceable, because we have a lot of formal wear, tuxedos and army mess dress and my evening gowns, right? My carefully curated cruise clothing that I don't just replace at the drop of a hat. I'm still wearing evening gowns I bought 25 years ago, right? So these are some really nice vintage items also at this point. So he finds the phone number for the vice president of Condor North America and calls this guy. And this guy's out driving down in California when my brother calls him. And he basically puts the screws to him. He says, look, you need to get my sister and my brother-in-law their bags. Like now, like I don't want excuses, just make it happen. Meanwhile, we had reached out ourselves. We had found a SeaTac Port Authority employee at the airport who seemed like he might be able to help us a little bit. He had heard about Condor doing this. This is an issue Condor has. They apparently left people's bags behind all the time and lied about it. He knew exactly where the bags would be. He went and took a picture of our luggage, which was next to everyone else's luggage. And he said, this is what happens. There was a connection, an Alaska Air connection apparently onto Condor, and that connection was late. And they had put our bags on the luggage cart that was waiting for the Alaska Air luggage to arrive. And since the Alaska Air luggage never got onto the cart, they just left the cart with our luggage behind. And apparently at that point, Condor had a reputation for engaging in this sort of shenanigans all the time, just leaving behind an entire luggage cart because they didn't get all the luggage on it that they wanted to, and they didn't want to pay to just send out a partially loaded cart, apparently. And then they would lie to passengers and tell them that they couldn't find it because they wanted to wait until their next flight to Europe to send the luggage onward instead of putting it on, say, paying to put it on a Lufthansa flight or on an some other flight going to Frankfurt, right? Because if they used another airline, they'd have to pay the fees. But if they waited for their next flight, then they didn't. Well, unfortunately, Condor doesn't have daily service from SeaTac. At that point, they had twice a week service. So at this point, we're getting to the point where we're going to be leaving Germany and we still don't have our bags. And this gentleman at SeaTac who has sent us pictures of our luggage and a sketch on the SeaTac map showing where they are. So we send that to Condor. And so finally they say, oh, we found them. We found them. So we'll send them to you in Germany. And at this point, we're on our way to Rome, literally on a bus to Rome. And we're like, no, you will not send them to us in Germany. You will send them to us in Rome. Oh, but then, customs, like, no. You will work with customs. You will tell them there's nothing to declare, and you will pull those strings we know you can pull, and you will get us our luggage. So they had 6 days. 6 days from when we landed in Germany to when we were embarking in Rome to get us our luggage. As of the morning of our cruise, they still hadn't got us our luggage, gotten our luggage to us. Still had not. So we went out and bought some suits for Ryan because he was going to need some nice clothing because Cunard has a dress code. And finally, we get back from buying these suits, and our bags have finally arrived. It is now 1 p.m. 1 p.m. and we should already be in Civitavecchia embarking at that point. Yeah, we were furious. My brother got them, though, to pay for everything. They paid for all the clothes we had to buy because we didn't think we were going to be getting our bags, because as of the morning of the departure of our cruise, we still hadn't gotten our bags. We got compensation, but it was the most frustrating experience I've ever had with an airline. So ever since, I've never flown with Condor again. That was the last time I flew Condor. Maybe they're better now, but that was pretty bullshit. So unfortunately, at that point, I didn't have the thought to use social media. I would use social media these days in this kind of issue, because honestly, the second you go and post on an airline site, on one of these travel company sites, they actually tend to move then. Yeah. So yeah. Any questions? Any questions, everyone? Any travel questions? Questions about who I am? For those who are just joining, I am the Creative Contessa. This is Travels with the Creative Contessa. This is my travel channel. I'm dressed in time traveler clothing at the moment, my 1480s Florentine ensemble, because I had a medieval live stream earlier today. But I am here live now to answer any questions you may have. If you have any questions, just let me know. I have lots of experience in travel. I'm currently working on the Korean Air first class vlog. I had the privilege of flying in Korean Air first class back in April. Points. I pretty much only ever fly with points. And I had the entire first class cabin to myself, more or less. And now that I've been going through the vlog and working through the footage, it's made me hungry, because the food on that flight was absolutely outstanding. And unfortunately, there's only 2 ways to earn Korean Air flights points, SkyPass points. It's either by flying on Korean Air or getting a Korean Air credit card. None of the other airlines transfer to them, or none of the other credit cards transfer to Korean Air. So yeah. It's very hard to earn those points. But what that means is that for now anyway, Korean Air's redemption rates are pretty excellent. What I've been told, though, next year Korean Air's redemption rates are going to be adjusted. I think that's going to make a lot of really angry Koreans, and I think Korean Air will probably have to back down from that if they do that, but we'll see. I may be wrong. Okay, any questions or comments about travel? I've just finished this finger loop braiding. Some of you who know me know that I generally prefer to do things while talking. So I was just making a 15th century lace, and I know it doesn't look like much, especially not on that screen. Oh, my hair is woven into it. Isn't that interesting? Let's see, as for upcoming travel, I am probably going to be going to Thailand at the end of January. If not Thailand, then Europe. I've got friends in both places and I would like to visit them. So I will definitely be doing lots of live streaming from there. Right now I'm in Korea, and I do plan on going to a couple of markets and doing some live streaming from those Korean markets, so you can see what a traditional Korean market is with the street food, most of which is not very healthy anymore because of the kind of industrial oils they're using. And I'll be showing you the kinds of products that they sell at these markets, the restaurants that are there, kind of the life that still flows in these traditional markets, despite the fact that most people do most of their shopping now at, big department store, grocery stores, for instance, or their clothing shopping at these grocery stores. But traditional markets in Korea definitely still play a really vital role in Korean culture and Korean social culture. At lunchtime, these markets are full. People who work locally go to these markets for lunch, for instance. On the weekends, they're jam-packed with Korean tourists, interestingly. And the market, Somun Market here in Daegu, the Westgate Market, has been there since the Joseon Dynasty. The way it looks now is not the way it looked in the Joseon Dynasty, but historically at each gate of Joseon, Korean era Joseon cities, which were basically a square aligned with the cardinal directions, each gate had a market. And so this was the market that was at the west gate, and it's still there. None of the other markets are there anymore, I don't think, from the other gates. So I plan on doing a live stream from there. The weather got kind of brutally cold, and then the air quality got bad, and I didn't want to go out. But I'll take a look at the weather this week, and I'll schedule that. That will probably be for Europe. That'll be the middle of the night, unfortunately, just because that's kind of how the timing works. The market's only open during the day, Korean hours, and so that could. It's not really very fun to go there at the end of the day because it's not very lively. So that'll be afternoon, evening for the Americas, but will be later. No, will be evening, nighttime Americas, or middle of the night, super early morning Europe, if you want to check that out. Okay, any final questions about travel? Some of you have asked me, for instance, about how it is that I book the kind of cruise fares that I book, because I'm very good at getting good deals on cruise fares. So my tip on cruising, if you want to cruise and you want a good fare, is to, if you have flexibility, start looking. Don't even look at the fares until 3 months out. And usually I get the best fares like 4 to 6 weeks in advance. I know that doesn't allow lots of options if you need to actually travel to a place, but that is really when the cruise lines reevaluate their stock, their inventory rather, and decide if they need to get more people onto the boat, and then they offer low fares, super low fares, just to lure people on, because they know that once you're on board, you'll buy drinks, you'll have meals in the premium restaurants, you'll buy merchandise, you'll spend money on excursions. So they know that once you're on board, you'll spend more money, which is why actually everyone, cruise fares, if adjusted for inflation, have not only not gone up in the last 25 years, they've gone down significantly. Someone posted recently a brochure from P&O Cruises. It was from 2000, and it showed the fares based on the length of the voyage and for each cabin type. So this is 2000, 25 years ago. And for an inside cabin for 16 days, the fare was $2,300 per person. They're charging like $1,200 for that, basically 16-day per person now. So not only have prices not gone up adjusted for inflation, they've gone down even without adjusting for inflation. So what this means is that cruise lines are unfortunately including a lot less in the fare than they used to, a lot less, all across the board. Things that used to just be part of the deal, no longer part of the deal. There's no longer 24-hour buffets, room service. Now you have to pay for everything you order. Most drinks are not included, except for water and juice from the buffet. Everything else you have to pay for. So yeah, people have been complaining about that. But the question I have, and this is a moment of introspection with myself I've actually had to have, honestly, if the cruise fare were as high as it should be adjusted for inflation, that used to include all of those things, I might not cruise very often because it would just be so expensive. It would trigger my frugality gene, my parsimonious frugality gene, and I just wouldn't book. So I think probably for an industry that has been expanding and is no longer an experience aimed at just a privileged few, this is the only way they could do it, is to offer a low price tag, a low bar of entry to get you on the ship, and then hope rightfully that people will then spend a lot of money on board. I know a lot of people do. I know people who spend thousands of dollars once they're on board, right? More. In addition to what they paid for the fare, they'll pay for all the premium restaurants, they'll spend money at the casino, they'll spend money at the bar. Right? So yeah, that's just where we are in terms of cruising. But the thing I love about cruising as a vacation is it's like a travel buffet, because you can go to all of these different places and get a taste of each of the ports. And then you can decide, oh, I definitely need to come back here and explore this in more depth. And the nice thing about it is that you're pampered, you're taken care of. You don't have to think about how you're getting to the next port. You don't have to think about where you're staying in the next port. You don't even have to necessarily think about what you're going to eat at the next port, because you could go back on the ship for lunch, for instance. So cruising is a very relaxing form of vacation and a good way to experience a lot of different destinations in a relatively short period of time. But there are other kinds of travel also that I really enjoy, and I plan on doing some of that throughout this year. I'm hoping to get to northwestern India, visiting a young lady with whom I made friends on my last cruise, Ishika. And I'm hoping to get to Uganda, actually, and I'm really hoping to get to Tajikistan, where I hopefully will be guided and hosted by a woman who is one of my fans on my medieval crafting channel, The Creative Contessa. Okay, well, if there are, just check to see if there are any further questions, and the the stream is just not showing the chats. If you have enjoyed this stream, please hit the thumbs up, double tap your screen, and subscribe. And if you actually want to be notified when I go live, because I sometimes go live kind of randomly, click the notification bell and make sure that all notifications are checked. I would like to thank my channel members for supporting my travel vlogging, sharing these tips and my adventures with you. If you would like to support my travel content work, consider becoming a channel member, and I provide lots of extra footage, advanced access to travel vlogs, and ad-free travel vlogs as well for my channel members. Okay. Oh, I also have a private Creative Contessa Discord where all of my channel members and patrons from across all of my content world can get together and chat and have access to extra resources. Oh, Takeda, it's okay. It's cool. So thank you all so much for joining. And Takeda, I'll be live again tomorrow on the Creative Contessa. I'm sorry that you're suffering so badly from a sinus infection. That is just really rough. Well, everyone, until next time, may your travels be adventuresome and completely unexpected, as mine are pretty much every single time. The best laid plans of mice and men, the best travel plans of mice and men, never survive first contact with the enemy. Okay, everyone, until then, take care.